I've had this 10-gallon aquarium tank for the last 2 years. Originally, it looked like this. However, over the course of 2 years, a fish fatality and 2 house moves, it has become neglected and undesirable to look at. This week, I want to change that. This tank used to be home to a betta fish. However, it passed away due to health complications out of my control. Since then, it has been restocked with a small school of black neon tetras and 3 tiger nerite snails. The first order of business was to reserve some water for the livestock, then scrape the front glass so that you can see what I'm doing. Afterwards, I proceeded to siphon out some of the water and algae so the water level would be lower, making the fish easier to net. I placed the fish and snails in this 5-gallon bucket with some of the tank water that I had siphoned out. I would also later place the plants in here to keep them wet. After the fish and snails had been removed, it was time to deconstruct the hardscape. It was mostly small stones and 2 driftwood pieces that I had collected from a beach. Nothing too tedious or time consuming to take apart. I have the mother of all Anubias plants here that has been established in this tank for the last 2 years. It's very large and will definitely require some trimming so it doesn't take up the majority of the new aquascape. I mean, look at this thing. It's bigger than my hand. It's absolutely massive. I removed the rest of the stones in the tank and set them aside for a different project at another date. The hang on the back filter was next to get taken away and cleaned off. I should mention now that my plan is to leave the existing substrate in place, but give it some life by adding root tabs for the plants and then capping it with a layer of white sand. This gravel's been in the tank for the last 2 years since I initially set it up, so it's seeded with a whole bunch of beneficial bacteria, and I don't see a point in taking it out. It has, however, settled over the last 2 years, so I re-sloped it towards the back, which will give the aquascape a little bit of depth. Next, I got outside and broke apart this large rock. I wanted a bunch of smaller pieces because the big rock just took up too much room in the aquascape. So if I made a whole bunch of smaller pieces, they would look a little bit less out of place in the small aquarium. I also collected any pebble-sized pieces that I found. I would use them as scatter rocks to sort of blend these rocks towards the substrate in the aquarium later. After a smashing good time, I decided I liked how this rock was sitting, and I had a handful of little rocks to play with, so I was content. I sanded off the edges of all the rocks with another rock just so that they wouldn't be as sharp and less dangerous to the fish once they're in the aquarium. Afterwards, I proceeded to rinse them off in the sink to get the extra dust off. After I was done fooling around with the rocks, it was time to see how I wanted my 2 pieces of driftwood to sit in the tank. Before, I had them sort of all pushed up against the left-hand side, and I didn't like that, and I felt that it sort of blocked off that side, especially with that giant Anubias growing, so I figured putting the wood in the middle was the best bet. I eventually settled on this layout. I used an old card to pull away all the remaining gravel from the very front of the tank, so that you wouldn't see it when I cap it in sand. It will just make it look a lot cleaner. Next, I pushed a whole bunch of these flourish root tabs into this gravel layer so that the plant's roots would have easy access to nutrients. And then I replaced the Anubias that I had cut down back into its corner. I think it likes it there. Why change things, you know what I mean? If you know what this plant is, let me know in the comments below. I forget its name, but it's going in the back. I also picked up a little 1-2 grow pot of Bacopa caroliniana that I'm also going to blend into the back and middle ground of the tank. I have 2 Anubias Nana Petite clippings that I'm going to put on some driftwood in the rocks, as well as a little bit of Java fern I'll do the same thing with. Here's a top-down view of my planting before I cap it in the sand, and here's what it looks like from the front. Coming together nicely, I think. The last step before filling it up is to add some of this white sand. I just bought the cheapest white sand that was available at my local fish store. I think this bag cost me about 10 Canadian dollars, so not too bad. I poured it in very gently to not disturb too much of the gravel. It took a little bit of time, but eventually I got it all done and was able to start adding more water. Once I had a decent layer of water, I went in and grabbed any residual pieces of gravel that had come up, and then also moved around some of these scatter stones to blend the hardscape into the sand, like I said I was going to do before. I didn't pre-rinse my sand because the only bucket that I had on hand was that one Home Depot bucket that all the fish and snails were already in. So in order to clear the cloudy water, as soon as the water line got up to a point where the filter would not dry run, I tossed in some water dechlorinator and then primed my filter so that it could start doing the work. I let it run for a few minutes and just circulate the water around the tank without any filter media in it before I added the filter media, because I don't know how long it takes for water to dechlorinate and I didn't want to accidentally kill any beneficial bacteria that was in my filter media. After I got the filter media in place, I just let it run and clear up the cloudy water for a few hours. Here's what it looked like after it was all done. If you're paying really close attention, you might see that I've left some algae on some things. Let's just say that I wanted to leave that on there so that the snails would have stuff to eat. In reality, I guess I'm just not that good at cleaning. I put the fish and the snails into a smaller bucket and let them reacclimate to the water temperature of the tank. And then after I let them float for maybe 30-45 minutes, I set up a drip line and drip acclimated them to the water. I'm sure it's pretty much the same, but I wanted to be safe just in case. I added some pothos clippings to the top in hopes that maybe they would root down and clear some excess nutrient from the water. When I put the fish in the night before, they were pretty stressed out, so I just left the light off and let them get used to their home again before turning the light on and filming them the next morning. I think the addition of the white sand really brings this tank to life and makes it seem a lot brighter and happier. I don't know if any of the animals really care, but in my head, they're a lot happier with their new home. I celebrated by feeding the fish some frozen bloodworms. I think they're more excited about that than their new home. If you enjoyed this video, maybe leave a like and subscribe for more in the future. See you in the next one.